From blissful road trips and love abroad to heartbreaking family conflicts and depression, can our dreams survive this turmoil? OMG. My girlfriend, 22 years old, and I, 25 years old, have been in a relationship for nearly 2 years, and we have been facing difficulties for a few months now. We both feel quite despondent, and it seems like we are pulling each other down. Discussing this is particularly challenging for me, as I am aware of how far we have fallen. Approximately 2 years ago, we met while studying abroad. We hail from 2 different nations, but we are both fluent in English. At the time I met her, I was still involved with my ex, feeling lost and uncertain about that relationship. However, I was instantly captivated by her vibrant energy and bright character. What began as a wonderful friendship rapidly blossomed into a romantic relationship after I made the decision to end my previous commitment. Although I was hesitant about starting a new relationship so soon after my breakup, I felt that I would regret not giving us a chance. I am her first boyfriend. Before her semester concluded, we had an incredible time together, embarking on an unforgettable road trip in a camper van across the country, enjoying fantastic dates, and creating lasting memories. It might sound cliché, but it was like something out of a movie. It genuinely felt as though we had found our soulmate in one another. This is why we chose to be together despite the impending long distance. She needed to return home while I stayed behind to finish my studies. Fortunately, I was largely done, which allowed me to visit her frequently. The longest period we spent apart was about 3 months. Although it was undoubtedly tough, we managed to stay connected through daily phone calls, watching movies together from afar, and supporting each other in our academic endeavors. Although we somewhat isolated ourselves from our surroundings, it didn't seem wrong, as we were both so happy and fulfilled in each other's company. My numerous visits to her country strengthened our bond, and we even got a taste of what living together might be like while staying at her family's empty apartment. I met her family early in our relationship and grew to love them. They treat me as one of their own. Each goodbye at the airport was heart-wrenching, and we eagerly anticipated the moment we could finally be together again. Our plan was for me to complete my studies, secure a job in a location where she could pursue her master's degree, and eventually move in together. However, things became more complicated when she met my family for the first time. After I had visited her a few times, I suggested that we spend the holiday season with my family and celebrate Christmas together. This was when we stumbled into deeper issues. Upon our arrival, my mother disclosed that she was unwell, following my pickup of my girlfriend at the airport. Initially, we were filled with excitement since it had not been easy for her to enter my country, and we had both been stressed for weeks about whether her visa would be approved in time for the celebrations. Unfortunately, that joy quickly faded once we reached my mother's place. She informed us that she had been in contact with my grandmother, who had contracted COVID-19. I voiced my concerns regarding staying with her, emphasizing that my girlfriend and I both needed to travel after the holidays for exams, and suggested we might have to spend an uncomfortable Christmas Eve for the sake of safety. My mother allowed her emotions to take over and effectively expelled us from her home. Fortunately, my grandparents welcomed us. However, the holidays were far from enjoyable. I could sense my girlfriend felt hurt, both for me because my mother had sent us away and because she sensed my mother was uninterested in getting to know her. She felt as if she was merely another girl. She also met my father, as my parents are divorced, and that interaction went much better than with my mother. Yet, she was still wounded, and I could tell she was not entirely at ease. It was only when we left to celebrate the remainder of the holidays with her family back in her country that we regained a sense of normalcy and comfort together. I know she contemplated leaving me behind in my hometown, but remained because of her love for me. I spent nearly 2 months at her place after the holidays, and it truly felt like I never wanted to depart. Eventually, I had to return home since I had completed my studies and needed to secure a job to begin repaying my student loans. I could not afford to either live with her or in my apartment abroad while I searched for work. When I returned home to my mother's, that's when everything began to spiral. Returning to a long-distance relationship was dreadful. In addition, I was mourning my time at the university, the place where we first met. I had hoped to remain there, work, and eventually welcome her for her master's degree, but things did not go as planned, and I had to let go of a place we both loved dearly. She accepted that and supported me through my job search as we remained hopeful about finding a place to be together. Eventually, I found a job abroad and organized everything to relocate there, seeking an apartment for both of us and institutions in the area for her studies. However, during the 2 months I spent at my mother's while planning for this next phase in our lives, we began to argue frequently. The main issue was my struggle to balance our long-distance habits of frequent phone calls and movie nights with living at home. Typically, I would be on the phone with her throughout the day, and when my mother would come home from work, I would end the call to have dinner with her. This would trigger conflicts with my girlfriend. We spent countless nights arguing, as she claimed she could no longer recognize me. She believed I was being manipulated by my mother into ending calls or dismissing her for routine chores. She once told me that I appeared more like a teenager than an adult, excessively concerned about my mother's opinions. This time was a nightmare, and I eagerly anticipated moving to another country and starting my job. Eventually, that moment came, but I left home under awkward circumstances with my mother, who was very upset because we had not spent much time together. Similarly, I was also on tense terms with my girlfriend, who felt that I was no longer prioritizing her and had lost interest. After moving abroad, I faced a few challenging weeks trying to find an apartment before my job commenced, but my desire to create a life with my girlfriend motivated me. I visited various properties and neighborhoods, envisioning the life we would share together. Although she initially acted distant and unapproachable, she gradually warmed up as I settled in and became more available for our routine. I found an apartment that matched the criteria I knew would make her happy, and I was eager for her to join me. Financial constraints made it difficult for her to visit, so I sold some of my possessions to buy her a plane ticket because I desperately needed her to be close to me. However, once she arrived, I began to feel extremely down. I was tormented, unable to comprehend why I felt this way. She was finally here, having endured so much conflict during our long-distance period, yet I did not feel joyful. I was devastated. She was incredibly caring and supportive, and I sought professional help regarding these feelings. Her visit was not lengthy, as she had to return to her country to complete her semester, and I truly feel my depression robbed us of precious time together. My therapist suggested that I might be experiencing trauma stemming from my family dynamics, possibly due to guilt from my mother's treatment, or an uncomfortable financial relationship with my father. The therapist indicated that my girlfriend's presence was awakening inner wounds from my childhood, which, at first, felt positive. I was terrified about not feeling as enamored as I once was due to our conflicts during my stay with my mother, but it seemed that worry was unfounded. Nevertheless, after several sessions, the heavy feelings persisted, and the pressure of long distance, coupled with adjusting to a new job and city, exacerbated my depression. My interactions with my family also began to deteriorate as I grew uncertain of whom I could trust. My girlfriend began to express negative views about my parents, suggesting they were the root of my and our troubles. I traveled to her country, hoping it would distract me from my pain, but it did not help, and I found myself crying frequently, feeling vulnerable and uncertain. I still formalized plans to move in with my girlfriend's family, and we traveled back together. Now that you have a clearer picture of the situation, let us fast forward to the present. I am essentially no longer in touch with my sister, who referred to my girlfriend and our relationship in aggressive and rude terms, making inappropriate comments during their last encounter. I have no contact with my mother, who has not made any effort to communicate with my girlfriend through social media, despite my having mentioned months ago how vital that would be. I wanted my partner to feel welcomed by my family in the same way hers shows affection to me. I have limited communication with my father after a dismissive comment he made when I once asked for financial assistance. Recently, my aunt expressed her concerns about my growing distance from my family due to my relationship. For the past year, my girlfriend has viewed my family as toxic and unsupportive of me. I have been torn, grappling with whom to believe. It feels wrong to cut ties with my family, yet I cannot envision abandoning my girlfriend because I am struggling with family matters. Additionally, her family has been so nurturing and supportive toward both her and me, and I often feel foolish defending my family, who show her very little kindness. While there are aspects of her perspective that I can understand, I do not always agree with her approach, and we've hit a point where she no longer wants my mother and sister in our lives. This situation is undoubtedly challenging for me, but I am trying to navigate it and mature. We argue almost regularly, primarily about my family. We have been on the brink of separation numerous times, and our conflicts have escalated to a point where I no longer recognize myself at times. We have both lost motivation to engage in any activities. My work situation is not going well. I maintain a few hobbies, but I am not dedicated to any of them due to our fluctuating emotions and financial constraints. She believes she lacks the energy to apply for jobs or master's programs, yet also feels guilty about being dependent on my income for our essential needs. It is a disaster. We used to uplift each other, being supportive and ambitious, but now our shared dreams seem to be fading. It is heartbreaking because I love her, and I know she loves me, but we feel trapped and I am at a loss for what to do next. Currently, she is so overly sensitive that we argue over trivial matters. My every action seems to upset her, leading her to believe I no longer love her or have lost interest. I am considering seeing a counselor. We are both reluctant to break up. We nearly did on my birthday. However, we have invested substantial effort into finally living together legally, ensuring she has equal employment opportunities. It feels like such a waste if we cannot discover a way to coexist peacefully and nurture our love like we used to. I realize this has been a lengthy narrative, and I am unsure what responses to expect. I kindly ask for understanding in your comments, as I am feeling more vulnerable than at any other time in my life. Thank you. Story 2. OMG. I can barely make ends meet, yet my wife refuses to clean while being a stay-at-home mom. House a total disaster. Exploding head. TLDR, my wife is unwilling to maintain our home, even though she is advocating for being a stay-at-home mother instead of returning to work, despite our financial situation not permitting it. Background: since the day I met my wife 8 years ago, she has never been particularly tidy. Her previous apartments have approached hoarder conditions, and the only times they were cleaned were when her parents visited from overseas and took it upon themselves to do the cleaning. This has been a consistent pattern I have observed, and she occasionally mentions that I knew what I was getting into when I married her, particularly when the topic of cleaning arises. My wife has always been a teacher since college and has excelled in that role. However, over a year and a half ago, she became pregnant with our first and only child. Following the birth, she was on paid leave for approximately 6 months due to a medical condition associated with her pregnancy. After the baby arrived, she expressed a desire to spend the first year with the child, and fortunately, her employer allowed her to take a year off without pay, guaranteeing her job once she returned. Although this decision would put significant strain on our finances, I am fortunate to have a well-paying job that barely covers our mortgage, food costs, and other expenses. The plan was for her to use this year to bond with our baby and then return to work afterward. During that year, she frequently mentioned wanting to be a stay-at-home mother, citing the high costs of daycare, which were nearly equivalent to her teacher salary, making a return to work seem less advantageous. The dilemma is that my income only just meets our expenses. We barely have a surplus of $100 each month, and her potential salary would have a more notable impact on our finances than it might seem. To address the situation, we tried launching a business with our $50,000 in savings, aiming to enable her to earn while caring for our child. Unfortunately, this venture has depleted our funds, leaving us with only $10,000 in emergency savings and credit card debt. The only profitable month was December, which resulted from holiday sales, but that was insufficient to match her teaching salary. As her year at home with our child nears its conclusion, I initiated a conversation with her. The original intention was to make this business endeavor successful enough to sustain her at home. If that did not succeed, she would need to return to teaching. I proposed a third option: she could continue being a stay-at-home mom, but only if she also fulfilled the responsibilities associated with that role, including maintaining the cleanliness of our home. After the house is tidy, she is welcome to devote time to the business if she chooses. She was not receptive to this idea, arguing that, unlike my mother, a stay-at-home mother's role is focused solely on childcare, and maintaining the home should not fall on her. At one point, I pointed out that I was the one who managed to clean the house despite working long hours and being the sole income earner. She countered that I only clean when we have guests, which is partially true. When I mentioned her parents would be visiting in March, she responded that she would not clean for them since they are not bothered by a messy space. She repeatedly insisted that cleaning is not part of a stay-at-home mother's duties, prompting me to look up the definition of a stay-at-home mom, which indicated that such a role includes caring for children and managing household responsibilities. During our argument, she mentioned that fathers should also participate in childcare, pointing out a recent night when I had fed our child and passed him to her for bedtime instead of putting him to sleep myself. What she seems to overlook is that while she attended a craft fair over the weekend, I took care of our child alone for 2 days from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. She appears to believe that I should balance responsibilities during my off time, even after having spent the entire weekend handling all childcare needs. Currently, our home is in complete disarray, reminiscent of its state before I entered the picture. This environment is unhealthy for our baby, and with 2 dogs, the house has not been vacuumed in over 6 months. Everything is caked in dust, and tables are cluttered with random items. A large dining table we possess has become a storage site for her craft supplies. We receive multiple Amazon deliveries daily, which clutter the entryway until I break them down for garbage collection. Our bathrooms have not been cleaned in over 9 months and are in desperate need of attention, despite my repeated requests. The shower situation is equally grim, covered in grime, with a hairball that exceeds the amount of hair on her head. I find it astonishing. She wants to stay home with our child but refuses to clean in exchange for that opportunity. If I were given the chance to avoid work and stay home to care for our child with only cleaning as my responsibility, I would gladly accept that role. During our discussion, I pointed out that if her job is being a stay-at-home mother, she would be at risk of termination due to lack of performance. It is unreasonable to be offered a position and only fulfill half the responsibilities. This has been incredibly frustrating. For the past 8 years, after long workdays that sometimes extend until midnight, I have found myself cleaning the house. Because she shows no concern for cleanliness, this cycle has become perpetual. Even when I manage to achieve some order, she fails to contribute any effort to maintain it, resulting in a chaotic entryway filled with boxes within weeks. Clothes are often strewn across the floor, simply discarded after being removed. The current state is unhealthy for our child, and I lack the time and energy to constantly revert our environment to a livable condition. Since the business has not generated sufficient income, my wife faces 2 choices: either return to work and pay for daycare, or fully engage in the role of a stay-at-home mom, which includes all associated tasks. However, she is reluctant to accept either option and seems to prefer a third path, which involves caring for our child while solely focusing on her business.